Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo, with your host, Patrick Moran.
All right, what is going on, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo Sports Talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you very much, as always, for watching, for listening, for following, for subscribing. I appreciate y'all very, very much. Depending, I guess, whether you're listening to this on Thursday morning, maybe late Wednesday night. Regardless, Thursday night, live from Imperial Pizza, I'm going to be joined by Brianna Aldridge, WKBW TV Channel 7 sports anchor and reporter. I've never had a conversation with Brianna before, never met her. So we're going to be doing it, not just doing it, but doing it live. Imperial Pizza, streamed on the video side on the YouTube channel, live at 8 p.m. It'll be available in audio podcast form overnight into Friday morning on Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. So make sure you guys check that out. As for today, not going to be a very long episode. And I also want to say that next Thursday, I'll have Tone Pucks back with me. He's been off for the past couple weeks, but we're going to start to ramp things up. I usually do a live show on Wednesday night for a Thursday podcast with Pucks. That'll be back next week. Today, and this is kind of like time sensitive, June 1st is coming. It's coming Saturday, in fact. And for the Buffalo Bills, that means at least potentially the door might be a little more open for them to do some things, free agency, possibly even a trade. Some money will be free because of the Tre White release that was a post-June 1st designation. So today, what I want to do is I took three positions, kind of like two in full, and then a couple guys from a third. And we're going to run down and discuss some potential possible Buffalo Bills additions come June 1st, now that they'll have a little bit more money to play with. I want to be real clear about this too. I don't think there's going to be, even with a little bit of money, which, by the way, of course, the Bills still have to sign their draft class, so a lot of that money will be used for that. But the flexibility is there a little bit more come June 1st to do something than maybe it is right now with a player, if there's one or two guys out there that they like for whatever specific reason or specific position. But I'm not of the mindset that the Bills are going to go out and spend $6.5 million like they did on Leonard Floyd last year. They signed him on June 6th, 1-year deal, $6.5 million, and it paid off pretty well because Leonard Floyd went on to lead the Buffalo Bills last year in sacks. Don't see that coming this year. One position I think until recent we would have been locked on is wide receiver, but I feel like as things stand right now, I don't see wide receiver being in touch with anything, not of significance anyway, even come June 1st. I think wide receiver's out. I think it's out because the Bills added Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and also for some of you out there who I know are still pretty, I don't want to say high, but maybe hopeful on Chase Claypool. So the Bills have signed two veterans who have done some pretty good things in this league, got them on really cheap deals. In the case of Chase Claypool, no guarantees whatsoever. So because of that, what they already have, plenty of receivers. I don't see them adding anyone else of note anyway before training camp. So wide receiver is going to be out. That's a position I thought initially would be a focus, but like I said, MVS, Chase Claypool, they changed that. Defensive end feels right now to me like it could be out, but not for sure. They signed Dwayne Smoot. And to me, that contract that he signed tells me that unless he is an absolute disaster in training camp, Dwayne Smoot's going to be on this roster. I think it's like 2 point something guaranteed. Now, again, that is not an official lock. We all remember a few years ago, the Bills gave O.J. Howard a 1-year, $2.5 million deal, and a lot of that was guaranteed. And he didn't even make it to the regular season. They cut him. That's how bad he was in camp. He just was not a fit on this offense. So don't want to go too far to say, it's 100%, but odds are very strong that Dwayne Smoot's going to be on this roster. So I'm not completely sold on adding to defensive end, although there are three guys that I'm going to hit on in just a few minutes here with this episode. For me, I look at two positions right now with the Buffalo Bills where I look at this roster as things stand right now, getting ready to get into training camp in July. And I think two positions that could, should, and likely will be added to. Not fancy positions, at least not one of them anyway. Nothing glamorous about it, but I think offensive guard is a spot the Bills and Brandon Beane may target come June 1st. And then I think corner is the other position. There's not going to be a lot of battles in training camp, especially for starting jobs. I kind of feel like, again, as things stand right now, the only potential, legitimate starting battle, like last year from day one of camp, there were at least two big time battles. You had actually three. You had Osiris Torrance trying to win a starting job from Ryan Bates, which ultimately he did. You had Kyrie Elam, Benford, Dane Jackson all in the mix to see who was going to be that CB2. So that you had that three-way action going on. And then you had at middle linebacker, you had Tyrell Dodson against Terrell Bernard, which at the time was not something very desirable to watch during training camp. But anyway, you had some legitimate, true starting battles last year in camp. Don't really see much of that this year. I would say maybe, and I hit on this on yesterday's show, if the Bills are going to have a legitimate starting competition battle, maybe strong safety. If Cole Bishop picks up things well early on, I could see him before the end of camp in the preseason, maybe rising up to legitimately challenge Taylor Rapp for the strong safety spot to who takes over for the departed Jordan Poyer. I see that. But other than that, any other battles on this roster are probably going to be depth related, bottom of the roster, bottom of the 53-man type battles. And when it comes to guard, let me be pretty clear about this too. I like David Edwards. I do. I thought he was great, and I mean great last year in his role as that 6th offensive lineman. Number 76, reporting eligible. That was kind of a running thing. He'd come on the field, good things would happen. He had the highest run blocking grade, actually, of anybody on the football team last year. And it's not like he doesn't have starting experience at guard. He was a starter on the Rams when they won the Super Bowl a couple years ago. So I get it. I'm good with him. I like him. But I don't love him being handed. As things stand right now, I feel like David Edwards has pretty much been handed a starting spot. Alec Anderson is probably his only, and I'm using air quotes here on the video side, competition right now for that starting left guard spot. I know they signed Leo Collins, but I specifically remember, I think it was Brandon Beane. Yeah, it was Brandon Beane. It wasn't McDermott. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it was Brandon Beane, though. Said that they want to start him off a tackle. They brought him here primarily to be a tackle, maybe a swing tackle. I'm still not 100% convinced that Collins even makes his football team. And if he does, it sounds like he might be a tackle. Somebody who could move to guard if he has to. But anyway, my point was, give me somebody who may be able to come into camp and not even necessarily unseat David Edwards, but somebody who might be able to provide him with at least a little bit of competition. I kind of feel like, we talk about Leonard Floyd last year and how much he worked out post June 1st, and that's what the theme of this episode is. The Bills also signed Brandon Shell, right tackle, last year after June 1st. And Spencer Brown was coming off a year injury-filled, did not play very well in 2022. So there were at least thoughts that, Spencer Brown doesn't look good early in camp, then maybe Brandon Shell would be able to challenge him for a starting spot. Now, it never materialized that way, and then Shell ended up retiring. But maybe you kind of got that same thing with Edwards. If he struggles a little bit at camp for whatever reason, or they can't find that 6 offensive lineman, and they, Joe Brady realizes he really liked that package he had last year and that David Edwards was perfect for that role. Maybe they want to do something else at guard. Then maybe they bring in a guard. So I think that's going to happen. And then the other spot that I mentioned that I think they definitely should and probably will add to is the corner position. As things stand right now, you're set at starter. You got Rasul Douglas. You got Christian Benford. Rasul Douglas is your starter, period, end of story. And I know on the, maybe on the interior, people might say, maybe Kyrie Elam could come in and give Christian Benford a legitimate battle. No, that's not happening. If Christian Benford's healthy, he's the starter. If Christian Benford stays healthy, Christian Benford has legitimate star corner potential. He played really well last year. His grades were really good. PFF, his analytics were good, and his eye test was good. He's a good football player, but he's got to stay healthy. Which kind of leads to this point. As of right now, Kyrie Elam is your third corner. As things stand right now, Kyrie Elam is basically 2021, 2022, 2023 Dane Jackson. Like, he will play if you need him to, and hopefully if he does, he can do some good things. Which, by the way, Kyrie Elam has done some pretty good things on the field. It's easy to just call him a bust, that he sucks, and he's a walking, mental mistake, and he's always handsy and getting called for penalties. But he's done some good things too. He's not a scrub. He's not a bum. If he wasn't a first-round pick, we wouldn't be calling him a bust. Now, he is a first-round pick, so I get it. But I'm not sold on Elam. I don't think you're sold on Elam. If something were to happen to Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford, which, by the way, looked no further than the playoffs last year. Benford literally didn't play against the Chiefs. Rasul Douglas played against the Chiefs basically on one leg. So that third boundary corner position is important, not just to the Bills, but to any team in the league, because your corners go down. To me, that's like the equivalent of the offensive side of the football. That fourth receiver doesn't sound that important. Like right now, Matt Collins, not really that important because it's all about Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel, Keon Coleman. So if Matt Collins is that fourth guy right now, it don't seem like much. But if any of those three guys go down, suddenly Matt Collins has a much more important role. Kind of what it's like with Kyrie Elam. And this is a premium position too. So point being is this. If you're not 100% sold that Kyrie Elam is for sure that third corner right now, I'm not sure that I love Jamarcus Ingram. I mean, he's a great story, a UB kid. Love him, root for him. He's done some things. He's earned his keep in the NFL. Being on like the fringe of the Bills roster, going between the roster, the practice squad. But I'm not sure that coming out of camp, I love Ingram on my 53-man roster. So I think that's a position that can be addressed. And last thing too, before I start running through these, I did check like right before we started, before I started getting into these earlier today. To my knowledge, all these guys are free agents. So hopefully none of you got to clap back at me and tell me that a player X is signed now with another team. To my knowledge, as of today, and I looked on multiple websites, these are all guys right now that are available. We're going to go in three positions. We'll go guards, we'll go defensive ends, which I only got a couple, and then we'll go corners. In fact, here's what I'm doing. I'm going to take a real quick break, and then when I come back on the other side, we'll actually jump right into this exercise. Not going to be too long with each guy, but we'll start with the guards right after this. All right, we are back talking about some potential Buffalo Bills post June 1st additions to this roster, which again, June 1st comes Saturday. So going to be here any day now. Starting with the guards. And I'll tell you what, let's kick off with the guy that Bills fans will be familiar with. Greg Van Roten. He was with the Bills in 2022. Kind of lousy with the Buffalo Bills in 2022. I remember him being forced into that Miami game when it was 10 million degrees out. Not a good performance, in fairness, being pressed into action there at center. But he plays guard, obviously, center. You know that. He started with the Raiders last year, played over 1,000 snaps, all at right guard. By the way, per PFF, which I'll be referencing a lot now over the rest of the show. Career best seasons per PFF. His grades with the Raiders. He had a 75.3 overall grade, 68.5 run grade, 77.4 passing grade per PFF. And this is over the course of a whole season. And if you want some perspective, a little bit of a basis of comparison, O'Cyrus Torrence, which, by the way, this is not me shitting on O'Cyrus Torrence. He was a rookie last year, and I think he's got plenty of room to grow, and I think he will grow into a good to potentially more than good guard for the Bills. Well, last year's numbers, again, Van Roten, 75.3 overall, 68.5 run, 77.4. O'Cyrus Torrence, just a 56 PFF overall grade, 59.6 run blocking, and 49.2 pass blocking, which was not good. So statistically, or at least I should say not statistically, but grade-wise with PFF, Greg Van Roten was much better last year. Allowed 5 sacks, 3 hits, 13 hurries, but he had no penalties last year. I would prefer for him to be a left guard because we're talking about a potential David Edwards competition here as opposed to O'Cyrus Torrence, who's going to be your right guard. Now, he did play some left guard, Van Roten, before with the Panthers in 2018, 2019. So it's not like he doesn't have any experience playing on that side. Old guy, I believe he's like 30. Old guy, say somebody's old when they're 32 years old. That's such an oxymoron. But anyway, he's up there. But in terms of maybe bringing in somebody who might be able to give David Edwards some competition, but worst case, somebody I think who makes this roster is a relatively versatile backup. If you don't fully trust Alec Anderson at this point, Van Roten could definitely be a choice. Another guy got Phil Haynes from, he played for Seattle last year, still relatively young at 28 years old. He started at right guard with Seattle last year. Injured ankle, limited him to, I think it was 8 games. Grade-wise, horrible for PFF. 52 overall grade, not good. 53.7 run grade, not good. 59.4 block grade, not good. Per PFF, gave up 5 sacks, 12 pressures, and 437 pass snaps. Not great. Not even really that good. The reason why I have him on this list is because I do have a buddy of mine who's a big Seattle fan. So I reached out to him and asked him about him and said he's a better player than the grades and the numbers indicate. Like there's sometimes, a stat could get charged to you and it's not really your fault. Which, by the way, I say it all the time, so I should say it now too. Take PFF stuff with a grain of salt. Like I loved the job Tyrell Dodson did last year for the Bills. Filled in admirably. Did some pretty good things. But is anybody going to sit there with a straight face and say that Tyrell Dodson was one of the 5 best linebackers in the National Football League last year? I think not. PFF says that, but in reality, I think not. But anyway, yeah, so Haynes has done, some good things. He's got some skills. He's a former 4th-round pick in 2020. Has upside. And he did play left guard for 1 game last year for Seattle. But holy shit, was it ever a disaster. It was against Cincy in week 6. PFF grade-wise, it was terrible. And he also gave up 2 sacks in that game. So anyway, it's not a juicy name, not a appetizing guy, but he's got a guy you want some competition, somebody maybe worth bringing in. Another guy who some people might be a little more familiar with than Haynes is Mark Lewinsky, formerly New York Giants. He's 32 years old. He's been in the league for 8 years. He had a high contract, like 8.1, over $8 million a year average over 3 years. So he was cut by the Giants this past offseason after 2 of those 3 years. Not good with them. was benched early in the season, was horrific. Right off the bat, week 1 against Dallas, in that opener, he gave up 3 sacks. He got benched, ended up starting like 6 games after. Started all 17 games in 2022. He played 291 snaps at right guard, 202 snaps at left guard. So you can play either side equally well or equally bad, I guess, depending on your perspective. All in all, with him, look, he was a complete bust with the New York Giants over the last 2 years. But who on that offensive line wasn't? That offensive line was in shambles over the past couple of years, especially last year. It was just abysmal. Maybe the worst offensive line in the NFL. But he was pretty damn good when he was an Indianapolis Colt from 2019 to 2021 for 3 years. So he's another guy that maybe would be worth bringing in. And then I got one more guard, Matt Filer he played with Tampa last year. He's going to be 32-year-old soon, 7-year veteran, which again, when you got guys just like Leonard Floyd last year, just like Brandon Shell last year, you're not going to get a lot of 25, 26-year-old free agents that are still sitting around looking for an opportunity come June, way after the draft. You got guys who are older, guys who are long in the tooth, guys who are players that at one point had big contracts and now they don't want to sign for minimum money, for crap money. So they're going to sit and they're going to wait for opportunities to come about. And in some cases, some teams, Buffalo Bills being an example, who did some post-June 1st designations, get some money freed up. So maybe that agent wants to go to a team that's got a little more money to play with, where maybe they wouldn't have signed before. But anyway, when it comes to Matt Filer, 32 years old, like I said, a 7-year veteran. He started the first 6 games with Tampa last year, got a knee injury, really derailed his season, lost his starting spot. 4 years. And this is what I like about him. He's got 4 years of experience starting at left guard, including 2019, 2020 with Pittsburgh, and then 2021 and 2022 with the LA Rams. Did not give up a sack last year for Tampa in 244 pass snaps, but was charged with 10 hurries. All in all, that's pretty good. He even played some right tackle early in his career. So, maybe he's got a little bit of flexibility there. So when you take a look at this list, Greg Van Roten, because of his familiarity with the organization, the coaching staff, or at least some of the coaches, even at this point, he's only been gone for 1 year from the Bills. He was here 2 years ago. So he knows the coaches, he knows the team, he knows the staff. He's somebody I wouldn't mind seeing in. And I like Matt Filer too. So either of those guys would be good additions. And again, I do think the Bills, maybe none of these guys, it might be somebody else. But I would be really surprised if the Bills don't add a guard sometime as early as Saturday. Moving on to edge rushers. All right, so I got 3 guys down right now. And 2 of these 3 you're going to know really well, maybe all 3 of these. One of them, let's start. I'm not playing fantasy football here, man. I'm not trying to be a homer. I think this guy might still have a little something left to be able to help the football team. I'm talking about Jerry Hughes. Jerry Hughes, if he plays, he's going to be 36 this season. Dude's old as hell. But if he doesn't retire, whether it's Buffalo or somewhere else, I feel like Jerry Hughes probably knows what his role is going to be as a defensive end, as an edge rusher going forward. With Houston last year, he played 475 snaps. Just under 42% was his snap count for the season, which at this stage of his career, 35 to 42% sounds pretty reasonable, where I think you could still get something out of Jerry Hughes. He had 3 sacks last year, 32 tackles, a forced fumble. So he still has a little bit of juice left in him. Hell, 2022, he had 9 sacks with Houston, which if I remember correctly, might be more than he ever had in Buffalo. He played really good in Buffalo, but never just seemed to get the sacks. An underrated player all around. And you know this. If you're a Bills fan, if you're not a brand new Bills fan, literally a brand new Bills fan, I don't got to sell you on Jerry Hughes. You know him. You know what he is. I think he's an underrated all-around player. And of course, 9 years with the Bills, extremely familiar with the organization, the fans, the city, everything. So sounds a little silly, But if he's willing to come in and compete, because any of these guys, by the way, any of these three guys, they come in, they're not just competing, they're not even competing for a starting spot. They're competing to make this roster. If he's willing to come in and compete and have a role on this team, I'd be all for bringing Jerry Hughes back. Which, when you talk about defensive ends, well, what do they have on this roster in terms of an opening? All right. Well, I mean, you got Von Miller, you got Groot, you got AJ Epinesa. There's your top three right there for sure. Regardless if Vaughn starts, AJ starts, who cares? Those are your three ends. Again, based on his contract, unless Dwayne Smoot gets hurt or falls on his face, probably your fourth. I feel like the Bills will probably carry 6. And when you say defensive end 5, or maybe ultimately would be defensive end 6, which essentially would be a red shirt his first year, but the Bills use a 5th-round pick on Javon Sullivan. He's going to make this team. He's a edge rusher with a lot of skill, but very, very raw. Needs time to develop for sure. So he's on this roster. So you got one more spot if you're keeping 6. And Casey Toohill is that guy right now. That's why I'm at least looking at defensive end, because I am not convinced that Casey Toohill is going to make this team. Who's got no guarantee money, by the way. I take that back, like 15 grand or something like that. Nothing. So you can have a guy like Jerry Hughes come in and challenge. Plus, again, just like with every position, and the Bills have been snake bitten by injuries. You know injuries come. So if somebody gets hurt, maybe you climb up the depth chart. But anyway, regardless, I think Jerry Hughes would be a good addition. If he'd be willing to come here and compete. Another guy, I feel like we talk about him every year, and ultimately almost every year he ends up coming back. Shaq Lawson, man. Give me Shaq Lawson back again. Dude's about to be 30. It feels like he's a lot older than he is. Maybe it's because of so many one-year deals. Then he left 2 other teams, the Jets. I think was it Miami? Yeah, Miami. Came back to Buffalo. It just feels like he's been in the league forever. But he's about to be 30 years old, so he's not that old. 15 games last year with the Bills, 308 snaps. Played in 30% of those snaps. Sounds about right. Just 1 sack. Had 4 in 2022. But again, Shaq Lawson here in Buffalo. I don't need to sell you. He's not a sack guy. He's not a guy who's going to bring down the quarterback a lot, but he's going to set the edge well. He is a really good run defender, and he makes some pretty big stops. And I think he's better than Casey Toohill, to be honest with you. I really do. Not that I'm some Casey Toohill expert, but I've watched some films since the Bills have signed him. I've looked up a lot of numbers. I'm not married to Casey Toohill. I personally like Shaq Lawson better. And by the way, I should also add, Shaq Lawson's a strong voice. He's a good leader. And that's something in terms of veterans, at least anyway, older veterans that are a little long in the tooth. They lost a lot of them. Jordan Poyer, Stephon Diggs, Tre White, Mitch Morse, younger, but Gabe Davis, one of those guys, probably Micah Hyde. So that's another reason why I wouldn't mind Shaq Lawson being back on this team. Quite frankly, I'm surprised he has a sign here already. Makes me wonder if he's even going to play anymore. So that's 2. And then the last guy is Carl Lawson. Carl Lawson signed a monster deal with the Jets in 2021. Never lived up to it. He missed that entire first season with a torn Achilles injury, which sucks. 2022, just kind of meh. Yeah. Last year, only played in 8 games, didn't really do anything. And you kind of got a sense that the Jets, they benched him to kind of were ready to move on for him, forgot about him. So, in total, he played just 23 games as a Jet. And I don't know what he's got left. I'm not sure. But there was a time not all that long ago where he was one of the better young, not maybe elite, but like version on elite pass rushers in the league when he was with Cincinnati. He's still young enough, closing in on 29 years old. I'm a little unsure about him. It feels like they kind of got that guy who's gotten injuries, but still has some talent and has shown some production. They already got that guy with Dwayne Smoot. For me personally, now this is, again, Carl Lawson is a guy I think they certainly should at least consider. But if it were up to me, and we're going to add defensive end, if it's up to me, give me a more reliable, a more well-rounded guy like a Shaq Lawson or a Jerry Hughes, former Bills players who know the system, know the team, and got some of that leadership that they may be lacking just a little bit. Let's move on to corners here to wrap up. I think corner is definitely a position that the Bills could, should, and will address. Again, don't necessarily know it's going to be any of these guys, but I got a handful of them I would like to see. And that's led by Steven Nelson. Played with Houston last year, 31 years old, played over 1,000 snaps with the Texans last year, 95.7% of the snaps. So he was out there almost every down. 4 interceptions, 6 pass breakups per PFF, a 71.9 overall grade, a 73.1 coverage grade. Opposing quarterbacks had a 70.6 passer rating when targeting him last year, which is the best actually of anybody on this list that we're going to be talking about. Only responsible for giving up 1 TD. He's been a starter every year since 2016. So if I have a concern about Steven Nelson, he's a guy who's pretty much been a starter his whole career, most of it. You come to Buffalo, you ain't starting. That's concerning to me. I don't know the person. I only know what he's done in his career. Could Steven Nelson come to the Buffalo Bills and willingly accept a backup role? Because barring injury, that's what him or any corner on this list is ultimately going to end up doing. Kind of like Josh Norman did at some point here in Buffalo. And I know a lot of Bills fans are familiar with Steven Nelson. He was a popular name that was discussed a lot 2 years ago when he was a free agent before he ultimately went to the Houston Texans. So that's a guy that I like. And if you could get him to come here and be that third corner, that boundary guy, I would sign him in a second. Also on my list, Adoree Jackson. Big contract with the New York Giants. Did not live up to it. He's always been a starter, but a bit unreliable. Like he hasn't played a full season since his rookie year back in 2017. Per PFF, he was lousy last year. And by lousy, I mean like really lousy. 48.6 overall grade, 37.6 tackle grade, 45.9 coverage grade, and 98.3 passer rating when targeted, which is the worst of all these corners. And he's always been crappy against the run. But overall, despite last year, those numbers I just said last year, over the course of his career, he's been pretty good. He's worth a flyer. Though I suspect when it comes to somebody like him, again, coming off a contract, not being all that old, he's probably a guy who wants more money. And the Bills are not going to be looking, when they got 2 established starters and they got Kyrie Elam still in the mix, who they want very much to be that guy. I don't think the Bills are going to shell out any real money for any quarter at this point, which might disqualify automatically Stephon Gilmore, the guy who I got next. Not really much to say about Stephon, man. You know him. You know plenty about him. Obviously, he's been a starter his whole career. He's going to be 34 years old. And this is going to be, if he plays and he doesn't go back to Dallas, this is going to be his 5th team in 5 years. 15 in 5 years. 83.3 passer rating last year when targeted with the Cowboys. Gave up 4 touchdowns. Again, the biggest question with him, if he continues playing, besides what kind of money is he looking for at this stage of his career, at this stage of the offseason, is he willing to transition from being a once upon a time really good to great starter in this league to a Josh Norman type, a Dane Jackson type? Is Stephon Gilmore that guy? I don't know, man. A guy, former starter or star player who won't even be a starter anymore. That might be a tough pill to swallow. I could see Stephon Gilmore personally, and I say this now, he'll probably sign somewhere in the next couple of days. But I could see Stephon Gilmore staying in shape and sitting on his couch and waiting until somebody goes down and waiting until an opportunity comes up where he can go to a team, a contender, which the Bills, of course, are, but he can go to a contender and he could step in and not be a backup. That's what I could see with him. Two more guys here, then we're done. Akello Witherspoon from the Rams, last year with the Rams anyways, 29 years old, a 6-year veteran, started 16 games with the Rams last year, 3 picks, 64.3 PFF overall grade, a 71.6 run defense grade. By the way, that is a really good grade for a corner playing the run. 76.7 passing rating against, which was the best of any Rams corner last year. Pretty talented player, but very injury prone. Missed most of 2022 with a hamstring. He also missed multiple games in 2020 because of a hamstring. He missed multiple games in 2019 because of a foot injury. So maybe because of the injuries and just the type of player he's been in his career, like a guy like borderline starter type, potentially, and 29 years old, could be an affordable option for the Bills. And maybe when I look at this list, for me, if they were to cite somebody from this list, possibly the most realistic option for the Bills at this point. And then the last guy I got on this list here, Fabian Morrell. I'll say it right one of these times. 30 years old, 6-year veteran, sometimes a starter. Started 10 of 16 games for Denver last year. He started 11 of 14 back in 2022. He started all 16 games with Atlanta in 2021. Again, just like with Stephon Gilmore, though, you have to wonder, this is going to be the guy's 5th team in 5 years, assuming he doesn't end up back in Denver, of course. I don't know. Maybe you disagree. But to me, 5 years, 5 teams, that red flag gets waved a little bit to me. That alarm goes off a little bit to me. Just weird because grade-wise, statistically speaking, analytically speaking, he's been relatively consistent. Last year, 62.4 overall grade, a 69.2 coverage grade, 64.6 tackling grade, 87.3 passer rating against him last year. His biggest issue is penalties, 20 of them over the last 3 years. In fact, 11 of them alone a couple of years ago. I still, personally, and maybe this is just my lack of belief in Kyrie Elam right now, but I like him more than Kyrie Elam. And look, if you were following Bill's OTAs, I know Kyrie Elam spoke to the media on Tuesday. Very poignant, and I respect what he said. And he admitted to the struggles and how hard it's been and that he's never struggled before. Even, alluding to getting his old number 5 back. He's been 24 with the Bills. He's worn 5 his whole life, and he just feels like that's a part of him. I'm not writing off Kyrie Elam completely right now. I'm not. I promise you. But I am not confident enough in Kyrie Elam that I'm just going to assume that because he feels a certain kind of way or because he's done a couple good things, that is going to click in that he could be that Dane Jackson, reliable boundary CB3. I'm just not buying it. I am not going to just buy it. I'm not going to hand that to him. I think the Bills would be making a big mistake, quite frankly, if they don't bring in some valuable competition to this position, with all due respect, a little bit more than only Jamarcus Ingram, which, hey, if Jamarcus goes and has a bomb camp and he beats out whoever that competition is for CB4, or hell, he beats out Kyrie Elam and he's that third corner. Good on him. A year ago at this time, it was mainly Dane Jackson with Kyrie Elam, and kind of Christian Benford was in the background. And Christian Benford emerged and wrestled that job away. I won't completely disqualify Elam or even Ingram doing that. I'm just not going to put all my eggs in the basket with them. So anyway, again, Saturday, June 1st, potential Bills additions. And look, there's a lot of guards There's a lot of defensive ends, a lot of corners that I didn't get to today. If you got some people out there you'd like to see the Bills pick up, leave a comment on the YouTube channel or, tweet at me at Patrick Moran TB. I would love to hear what you think. Again, one more time, Thursday night, 8 p.m. live, Imperial Pizza. Brianna Aldridge, Channel 7 sports anchor and reporter, will be with me. Stream live, 8 p.m. Available in podcast form shortly after. That's tomorrow. As for all you, have a good one. Be back. Brand new show live, Imperial Pizza tomorrow. Talk to you guys then.